I now call upon the public orator, Professor Ben Cosh, to present Jayne Ozanne for the award of an honorary degree.
Jayne Ozanne is both completely at home and somewhat at odds with being in this building today. Completely at home because she is a Christian with a long history of working closely with the senior leadership of the Anglican Communion. Somewhat at odds because that history includes vigorously challenging the Church on issues of equality, inclusion, and safeguarding. Growing up, Jayne went to a local Methodist church in Guernsey, where she was an active member of the youth group before later helping to set up the Guernsey Christian Fellowship. At university, she started attending evangelical Anglican services, where her faith continued as a central part of her life. So much so that in 1999, she was appointed as a founding member of the Archbishop's Council of the Church of England, where she sought to hold up a mirror to the church that she felt was increasingly out of touch with the nation it served. In 2004, she left the council, citing deep concerns about the future of the church and foreshadowing the impact she would have many years later, predicting that internal conflicts, including arguments about gay clergy, could lead to fragmentation and decline of the organisation. Alongside this, Jayne developed a highly successful and varied career. She was one of the first female students to study mathematics at St John's College, Cambridge, graduating in 1990. And then, in an unusual move for a mathematician from a family of mathematicians, she began working in marketing for Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark, where she promoted products like Fairy Liquid and Lenore, running huge campaigns across the UK and Europe. In 1996, Jayne was appointed head of marketing at BBC Television. She helped create the BBC Two idents based on stylized twos and was part of the team that developed the Comedy Zone. And perhaps most importantly of all, she was involved in approving the use of a song called 3 Lions on a Shirt, brackets, It's Coming Home, for the BBC's coverage of the Euros. You see, Jayne Ozanne makes a big impact wherever she goes. After leaving the BBC and the Archbishop's Council, Jayne went to Magdalen College, Oxford, to study international diplomacy as the first British student on the Foreign Service programme. She moved into fundraising, first for the World Association for Girl Guides, then Oxfam, and in 2012, the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, where she connected religion and career in ways that would echo powerfully through the years that follow. But her relationship with the church would be different than it had been before, because Jayne had come to terms with the fact that she is gay. She spent much of her early life believing that Christianity and homosexuality were just not compatible. She refrained from relationships and went as far as to seek deliverance ministry and exorcisms, practices often today called conversion therapy. Years spent wrestling with depression, 2 nervous breakdowns, 2 periods in hospital. But in 2009, she came out to her friends and family, and in 2014 did so more publicly when she once again became involved with the Church of England. She was elected to the General Synod and decided to engage powerfully in the debates around sexuality in the Anglican Communion. She set up the Ozanne Foundation and works tirelessly, campaigning for religious organisations to end discrimination based on gender and sexuality. She founded and continues to chair the UK's Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition, bringing together more than 100 organisations working towards this goal and campaigning for the introduction of legislation. In 2019, she joined the government's LGBT advisory panel, but resigned 2 years later, citing the hostile atmosphere in government towards LGBTQ+ people and the failure of successive equalities ministers to understand the issues and make any progress. And in 2023, Jayne resigned from the General Synod because the church was leaving too many people at risk and making it difficult for clergy and others to break ranks and speak out when they became aware of discrimination and abuse. You might even have seen her on the TV in the last couple of weeks discussing these issues again following Justin Welby's resignation as Archbishop of Canterbury. As I say, completely at home and somewhat at odds. But put simply, Jayne Ozanne is one of the most prominent campaigners in the world on LGBTQ+ equality in religion. Her efforts have led to a public apology from the Church of England for the way LGBT Christians have been treated. She has spoken about religious discrimination on television, radio, social media, and to governments, archbishops, and the Pope. Jayne Ozanne has spent her life campaigning for religious organisations to accept the truths that gender is more complicated than XX and XY. Sexuality is so much more than one man and one woman, and neither are grounds for discrimination. For her huge contributions to equality, diversity and inclusion, Most Honourable Chancellor, I'm delighted to present to you Jayne Ozanne for the degree of Doctor of the University honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. No, I'll take it back. No, I'll give you another one. I'll start again. I'll take that one back. By virtue of the authority committed to me, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of the University.
Thank you.
Honoris causa.
Thank you.
Go and tell them all about it.
Thank you, Most Honourable Chancellor, graduates and distinguished guests. I'm incredibly grateful to the University for honouring me in this exceptionally generous way. In many ways, I wish my work tackling discrimination and prejudice amongst the world's religious leaders wasn't necessary. But sadly, it seems that it's becoming an all too pressing concern, especially with regards to safeguarding LGBT people's lives and protecting us from harm, particularly the harm of conversion practices. I can't help feeling that many of you graduates today may well have taken part in the Lambeth Walk that the LGBT staff network at the University of Kent organised during the 2022 Lambeth Conference, thanks to the work of Jan Moriarty and her team. It was an extraordinary occasion, which I was very proud to be part of, where students and staff joined together with, yes, a handful of Anglican bishops, some of them even openly gay, to celebrate diversity and the dignity of all. It was one of several events that I and others organised during the global gathering of Anglican bishops and archbishops at the university that summer, and ensured a very vocal and meaningful stand against the anti-LGBT rhetoric and practices endemic across so much of the communion. Your principled and public stance was the perfect antidote to this. Silence, deafening silence. In the immortal words of Martin Luther King Jr., in the end, you will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. You see, it takes courage to speak out, to make a stand, to go against the tide and say enough. We will not tolerate this abuse any longer. In contrast, it's far easier to stay silent, to hide behind the wall of conformity, or in the case of the House of Bishops, uniformity, where one keeps one's head down, goes with the flow, and never ever rocks the boat. I mention the House of Bishops, particularly in this, of all places, where their silence and shameful inaction over matters to do with the horrific case of sexual abuse in the Church of England, covered up by so many for so long, has indeed been deafening. All, that is, bar one very brave bishop, a woman, Bishop Helen Ann Hartley, who chose to stand tall and follow her conscience, stating that for her reason for speaking out, because it was quite simply the right thing to do. History will remember her. It will not look so kindly on those who, through fear or loyalty, chose the easy route of staying silent. A silence that is all too familiar to those of us who are LGBT and know just how toxic and damaging certain church teaching can be on the lives of young and not so young LGBT people, brought up in churches where they are told they are sinful and will go to hell if they ever dare choose to love and be loved according to their nature. Now, given we are in this ancient holy place, I hope you will forgive me if I quote for a moment from a book that I and millions of others around the world hold so dear. What does the Lord require of thee but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? That's Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. That is the principle that I myself have always tried to live by. It is the principle that guides me and helps me know when my red lines are crossed and when I need to act or speak or, yes, resign. When I need to defend those who have no voice or who are being harmed by those in positions of authority, be they political or spiritual. Friends, as you enter this new chapter of your own life, what is the guiding principle that you will choose to live by? Will you commit to speaking out when you see injustice? Will you be brave and stand against the tide? For goodness, we know the world needs people to speak out for those who have no voice, especially when those in positions of power abdicate their own moral responsibility to do so. So please, be strong, be courageous, and please remember you have a voice. Thank you.